I am Sarah Therese Cowan. Sarah, after my great-great-grandmother, and Therese after my mother and her grandmother. Proud great-granddaughter of a war hero. However, I could just as accurately introduce myself as Sarah, great-granddaughter of a broken man. Let me explain. My family are very important to me. I shared a very special relationship with my great-grandmother. Unfortunately, I never met my great-grandfather. He died in 1986. But I felt that this speech competition provided the perfect opportunity for me to reach back across the generations, to learn a little bit about him and honour the service that he gave to his country. I expected I could talk about the 2nd New Zealand Expeditionary Force, focusing on the battle for Monte Cassino where Pop fought. Using the details of the battle as the framework for my speech, my plan was to give the horror, the losses, and the triumphs of the Italian campaign a personal face, telling the story through the very average, very ordinary eyes of my great-grandfather. My speech plan promptly fell apart. You see, from the time when Pop arrived home in 1945 to the time of his death in 1986, he did not speak to anybody about his years at war. Not one word. My great-grandmother had been considered lucky. Pop had come home, hadn't he? But you see, the man that arrived home from Italy was not the man she had farewelled 3 years previously at the train station. He was just a little bit broken. Not physically, although he was now quite deaf from a shell that had exploded nearby, killing his best friend, but emotionally and psychologically. Shut down, silent. It was as if what he had seen, what he had heard, and what he had done had never really happened if no mention was made of it. Pop's silence continued over the years, broken only when he woke, engulfed by one of the many night terrors that haunted him, or when he would call out incoherently to his lost mates, caught up in the delirium of the recurrent attacks of malaria that plagued him on his return home. Nan was complicit in this cloak of silence too. For one of the things my family could tell me about the war was that Pop was not the first love Nan had waved off to fight for king and country. I'm nearly 17 years old, and for the first time while preparing for this speech, I learnt that my Nan had to endure letting the two great loves of her life go off to war. Her fiancé, before she met and married Pop, losing his life in the skies over Britain while serving with the RNZAF. I was sad that my precious Noni had borne this huge sorrow, stoically, strongly, and silently. And that I, growing up, had been cocooned and protected from this terrible cost that my great-grandparents' generation had paid for the freedoms that I enjoy today. Their silent strength replicated in thousands of households throughout New Zealand. A collective national cloak of silence, insulating my generation from the sacrifice made by every member of every Kiwi family during the war years. I do believe that my generation are beginning to understand and honour the sacrifice made by our returned servicemen and women. At dawn services, many of us march proudly with our forebears' service medals pinned to the right sides of our chests, falling in as the sun rises. and marching solemnly behind the diminishing ranks of heroes who served, sacrificed, and returned, in remembrance of those who did not. As children of a digital multimedia age, we have access to volumes of historical data at the push of a Google button, war condensed into sanitized columns of statistics. We get the cold, clinical macro mechanics of war. But what I believe my generation does not get is war at a micro level, a family level. The social cost of war to a whole generation. I accept. Some lost more than others, but all were changed. All paid a price of some sort, just like my nan and my pop. The thing is, many of those who lived through the war years are members of our aged communities now. They may be the elderly neighbour, widowed when her husband was picked off by a sniper in the jungles of Wairarapa, or the old man in the wheelchair who speaks too loudly in the supermarket, deafened by the incessant chatter of the machine gun that he manned at El Alamein. Or a war orphan, now themselves a parent, who rose above their own personal tragedy and forged a happy and successful life, a New Zealand life, for both themselves and their families. The thing is, we just wouldn't know, couldn't imagine what the eyes of this generation have witnessed, the sadness their hearts have bravely borne. My challenge to all here today, our youth, businessmen, Defence Force personnel and ministers, is to open your eyes and your hearts to their sacrifice, large or small, and to remember what they as a generation have done to secure the world each of us lives in today. We owe these everyday war heroes a debt of respect. I urge all New Zealanders to honour this debt, to think about it and to remember. For those who are left now grow old. Age does now weary them, and the years now condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, like the brave and honourable servicemen gone before, we should respect and remember them.